I was an absent leader. I was hurting people. It was a train wreck. And I get hit across the chest with a baseball bat. God said to me, you're an addict. And I said, what am I addicted to? I said, you're addicted to being busy and you medicate with cigars, social media, and alcohol. And you're preaching a message you do not live. And it changed everything.
Welcome back to the Hard But Worth It podcast. We have a friend here, Fab. Before we get started, I wanted to just drop the obvious into the middle because it's not often that you have 3 Enneagram 8s
at one table,
coexisting at one table. So here we are, 3 Enneagram 8s. Kirk, I think you're an 8 with the 7 wing.
Yep.
I think sitting across, which is appropriate, another 8 with a 7 wing, you know, the confrontational, and then I'm the 8 with the 9 wings, so I'll play Switzerland here and maybe help navigate
an armed Switzerland. Though,
although
right?
the 8's still there, they just call me a bear. You may be Mavericks, but I'm a bear.
Okay.
But let's just finish this little story here, just to go on. But 3 8s walk into a bar. What's the end of that story?
I think that these 3 8s are actually pretty unhealthy and early in their 8 journey. And they start this amazing bar fight, probably amongst themselves, but it spills out. And by the time it's done, the whole bar burns down. What do you think?
No one survives.
Unhealthy 8s, yeah, 100%.
Unhealthy
8s. Healthy 8s, we'd probably usher the people out, take control, lead the situation well, have fun in the meantime. Come on, there's a fire. Let's get everybody out.
That's right. Create some drama. I think the 8 on the Enneagram is known as being the...
Wait. What happens in your story? Yeah.
Well, to me, it's 3 walk in, 1 walk out. And that's probably me walking out, right?
So the purpose of this podcast today is to figure out which one of us would walk out. And we really want everybody to actually make comments in the note.
They already decided. I'm sitting
in
the center.
Yeah,
so I walked out, right?
All right, fine. There's a frame on this. I heard one person describe 8s as they have very big guns and they're not afraid to use them. Mm-hmm. And I thought about that for a while, and I thought that's not quite enough of an idea for me, because I think of the 8 as being in the protector frame as being the quintessential Western sheriff.
Yeah.
Right? Or the quintessential Western gunslinger. Like both of those are 8s. One's healthy, one's unhealthy.
Right,
they both have big guns.
Yeah.
Right? Neither of them are afraid to use them, but one of them wants to, and the other one would prefer not to.
Yeah.
Right? But the fact that he can is actually what probably gives him most of his strength and power in the community, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? He does everything he can to prevent that until the final, shootout or whatever.
Yeah.
And I always thought that metaphor works for me, because the healthy 8 is that person that you can relate to. They're part of they play this role in the community. They're trusted. They're welcome. They bring a version of peace in the process of all of this.
And like you said, an 8 goes to a 2 in health, which is a helper.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which then feels like the antithesis, if you call it a challenger, but it's not. I love that analogy. That analogy is great.
Yeah. I've learned too over the years in my still growing, still emerging, but how I show up as a challenger matters, because I think some people, wherever they're at along the way too, react, or there's trigger words that can cause me to be misunderstood in a certain way. One of those questions is a why question. Why?
Yeah.
And so I've learned, even in my company with some of my senior leaders and those that I'm investing in, rather than ask why, think of a better question for me, which is what.
Absolutely.
So if I can ask the what beneath the why, I immediately bring them to the table to lean in to the conversation, which is really my motive anyway, rather than going, why did you do that? Which is feels questioning.
Yeah,
hey, tell me, what were you thinking when you made that decision?
Yep.
Oh, you want to know what I was thinking?
Yep.
Have you found some of that?
That's the science behind that.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like you never get any result with a why. It's always, so what was going off?
Right.
What could I do to help you? What were you thinking in that moment? So that they have the opportunity where they don't feel like they are being antagonized, questioned, interrogated, right?
There's a big difference between being challenged and being threatened.
Right, exactly. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, in coaching work, we flip that around. Because in coaching work, one of the things that's happened is you have been given the invitation to challenge, right? It's part of the thing. They say that a good therapist and a good coach, if they don't piss you off every third meeting, they're not doing a good job.
Right.
That kind of an idea. So if you can earn the invitation, if you can gain the invitation, all of a sudden something that might be rude in an objective sense can become very helpful.
Yeah.
It actually becomes a kindness. And all of a sudden the why question flips. And so we call it in coaching work, we call it the why shovel, because why is the emptiest of all questions. It's a vacuum and it just digs. But you have to ask it in the right time, in the right way, because it is a rude, inappropriate question like you're describing.
Right.
But once gained that invitation, then you can sit with someone and just go, that's interesting, why? And you can why something into the depth of a subject.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with a why. It's
Sure.
it's contingent
Timing.
on the situation,
Right.
timing, and
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah.
I agree. So here we are. We're having a great conversation.
We're already
3/8. So I imagine we're all going to walk out of this room today.
You think
It's
so?
It's not a bar, but I mean, I think we're going to have a good conversation. Hey, kick us off. Just pull us in kind of 30,000 foot level, your story. Maybe start with what you're doing today. And then from there, we might dig back into flashback, what led you to this place. But kind of pull us into where you're at. What are you doing?
Yeah.
What's your life given to you these days?
Yeah. So I am the director of a conservatory of the arts. And what that does is we have a BA and we have certificates in acting, dance, musical theater, screenwriting, and film. And we send actors out into the industry. Predominantly, it's a faith-based conservatory, and we send actors out into the industry and dancers because we want to see the culture of Hollywood changed. Not just Hollywood, but even the dance world, film world, screenwriting world. Because I think that, I say it like this, that the most influential medium probably in all of the 7 spheres, maybe outside of politics, is the entertainment industry. And I think, a lot of the stuff that is the content that is being created now is used to propagate a specific agenda. And I just want to send people out there to create and just tell good stories. You know what I mean? And on my podcast, we've talked about, what's the difference between propaganda and, telling the truth. Like we're trying to tell something, right? Whether it's a faith-based story, whether it's a political story, whether it's a romantic comedy, we're always telling a story, but where does storytelling not become propaganda? And I see the media really kind of promulgating a lot of that at the moment. And we just want to change the culture, like train them to the highest standard and send them out into the industry to affect the culture of
So
Hollywood.
when you say culture of Hollywood, that implies, I think it's obvious, but it implies that maybe right now there's a culture that needs to be changed.
I think it's a culture that needs hope.
Yeah.
Right, because a lot of actors, a lot of people in that industry may be well known, but I think they're missing the component of identity. And I think we send people out with their identity at least way more elevated than when they first came in. And I attribute that to my Christian faith, right? We teach from a point of view of what does God say about you, right? And train them holistically. That it's not about success isn't being an A-list movie star or winning an Oscar for your script. It's about going in and being the healthy artist that God has created you to be.
I'm curious if you could take us back to the beginning. I don't know where the beginning of this would be, right? Not the beginning of Fab, but the beginning of this journey to build this thing. Where would that start? Where would you place that?
I think it all started when I wanted to become an actor. I was 13 years old. My dad took me to the movie theater. I think it was in 1985, I think it was. I was 10. And he took me to see a movie with Tom Hanks called Big. And I was completely enamored.
Great movie.
Brilliant movie.
Yeah.
It was the first time I think that I was transported into another world. And I was just blown away by this fantastical story. And it was at that point that I thought, I want to spend the rest of my life doing that. And as a young 10, 13-year-old, I didn't know that I really knew what it would look like to do that.
Yeah, what does that mean, right?
But I said to my dad, I think I want to be an actor. And you think your dad is going to run up to you with open arms going, yes, son, of course. Here are all my resources. But it wasn't that at all. It was like, well, it's a precarious industry, son. And I don't really know anybody because I'm a barber. So maybe we'll just say no for the time being. But
did he say no?
He did.
He took it away. Or
did.
Attempted to.
He did. But what I realized, the more and more I persisted with it, his no wasn't a hard no. He was testing me to see how serious and hungry I was about it. So he was inviting me into an opportunity. That's what a good dad does, right?
Yeah, he created the initial resistance.
He created the initial resistance. If I would have said no, then it would have been like, yeah, you probably weren't meant to be an actor.
Totally.
But he's like, no, okay, I'm just going to see. I'm going to bide my time and just see what choices you make. He said, I will do one thing, though. If you find yourself an acting coach, then I'll pay for you. So I just went through the yellow pages, looked under A for acting coach. First one, I gave him a call. I said, have you got any space? They said, yes. So that's how it started.
Wow. How old were you then?
I think I was 13.
Wow.
I'm 48 now, so it's kind of a long way
13.
to kind of
I'd be like
back.
eighth grade going into freshman, kind of.
Yeah, it was in the UK,
ninth
so
grade.
I can't remember
Okay.
what was. We have a different system there, but yeah.
Yeah.
But probably, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting too, because I think in that age, I was pretty clear I wanted to be a professional baseball player.
Okay.
Right. And it was the same kind of thing. It was giving your life to something that I think a lot of elders and people who are a little bit further ahead of you kind of think, well, that's a pretty big, audacious dream. Chances are you won't become one. But it really lit a fire in me where I did spend several years going after that passion. It's interesting that you had a real clear focal point, a passion around acting, and now today you're giving your life to that. I mean, a question that I would have there is, has that been a common thread, or have there been times where that's waned and you've been tempted, or you've chosen another thing thinking that was dead and not going to happen?
Yes. I mean, I think that's probably the life of most actors, really, because even though I was blessed with my theatrical body of work and, a bit of TV and film, but in the times when it feels like it's not happening, in the valley, or in the time where you're like, well, I thought that's what my calling was, but it doesn't look like it's happening. What do you do? So of course you question it. And there were times throughout where like I did my first Hollywood movie when I was 27. And after that, my ego thought, this is it, Fab. This is going to happen. And the opposite happened, actually, after that movie. I did another movie that got nominated for Best British. And I think I was saved from a career that would have catapulted me, because I don't know if I would have known or what my character would have done in that scenario. So I went into real estate and I started developing real estate. And then just decided to throw my energy at going into business.
That's incredible. Like, I think of, 14 years later, too, that you had your first real opportunity. So even in that 13 to 27-year-old, what was that journey like? I mean, it's we read these little highlights in someone's life and we go, wait a second, that didn't happen overnight.
No. I mean, I went to one of the best conservatories in the UK. So that I knew there was a value in training. So I would just, I threw myself into the training. And then after that, I got plenty of gigs in theater, and I'd worked with some amazing people, James McAvoy, Parminder Nagra, some amazing actors that are hugely working, well-known actors in the US, British. But I always wanted to be in movies. I always felt I was Leonardo DiCaprio. I always felt within me that was the ability that I had, but my character would just not, I would have blown up my life. Completely blown up my life. I don't think I'd be married. I don't think I would have blown up my life, because I said, I want to be famous for God. And I'm like, let's just backtrack that. He's pretty famous. He owns the world and created it and is the best-selling author that's ever lived on the planet. So you just have to kind of look and go, there was just so much egocentric stuff involved, really. You know what I mean? And that that journey was a journey of, in that time there was a nervous breakdown. in that time, there was many things that went off before I got my first Hollywood role that would, in essence, feel like a big milestone of success, which it was.
Sure.
But it didn't have the ROI that I anticipated it to have.
Well, it's a success on the scale of acting, right? It's a
Yeah.
milestone on that scale.
Yeah.
But it sounds like in the middle of that, there's this nervous breakdown and there's another scale at work, right? And it sounds like you were, what I think I hear you saying is something like, I was being successful in one category, but not in many others. Is that a fair way to say that?
It is. I think I just didn't know who I was.
Okay. And why? There's the why question. But what created the conditions in which that identity didn't get formed, maybe?
Because I think I based my identity on the success I associated with what I thought acting was.
Yeah.
And then when that wasn't met, I would crash and I wouldn't understand who I was. So when I was working with a star or working with great material, I'd be like, okay, this is my calling. Outside of that, I didn't know who I was.
And those moments are rare. It's not like, for most of us, we have a career, we go to work, we work at it every day you're at work. I hear a lot of actors talk about these big gaps between jobs. Like if you're doing 1 or 2 a year, you're working.
I mean, we depend. Some years there would be a lot more than that. I mean,
okay.
a lot more than that because
But you talk about downtime, right? It's like this. What was going on in those spaces?
I mean, a lot of meetings, a lot of auditions, a lot of trying to push myself forward because I did see acting as a business as well. Being an entrepreneur, I did see it, but I think it was bar work. It was, married life. It was raising kids. It was trying to find how to survive in those times. Because when you're working, the money's pretty good. When you're not working, it's like, oh, how am I going to pay my mortgage? Oh, I'm going to have to go back to something. Because my dad was a barber. He trained me to be a barber. That's where I learned work ethic. It's where I learned artistry. He was an amazing artist. A value for starting at the bottom, not at the top. So I guess I went back to those things that I knew to support myself.
So after that all didn't come to pass, is that the right way to say that? The
Yeah,
acting thing Did you lay it down? Did you? Because you went somewhere else, right? You went on a different track.
I did. I mean, I don't know if I wanted to say that I actually laid it down intentionally.
Okay.
I think it happened to me. And I think what happens is I think with anybody that has a real passion to do something and it doesn't happen in the way they may perceive it, you then start to build pain and fear associated with that thing that you love.
Yeah.
So acting became really painful for me. So when I went into real estate, I found that I was good at making money.
Yeah.
I found that I had to have success, right? I wanted to be successful. I think I looked at so many other people that were successful associated with finances or associated in their careers. And I thought, I've got to be successful.
Yeah.
Success is an internal thing of like, I'm successful with being a great dad. I'm a great husband. Success is not always attributed to finance, but it can be a byproduct of. So I always had that idea of wanting to have wealth or notoriety because that would kind of satiate my internal pain. And so I went in and started developing real estate and was really, really good at it. And, God wastes nothing. And I think learning that, even though I wasn't acting, looking back now from the movies I've produced, I understood the mechanics of business and product. And I was like, well, I can use it now again in the sphere that I'm in. So I went into real estate and really, really enjoyed it.
It's funny too, like when you think of when we start off in our journey, I think sometimes we get kind of teased into this big vision of a vivid picture of a preferred future.
Yeah.
And we see we get this glimpse of the peak and there it is, that's my destination and we can see it. And it's compelling enough, I think, designed on purpose to get us to embark on the journey.
Yeah.
Right.
Because where we're at, where we see the view to where the trailhead starts, there's a long journey to getting there. And I think the journey is the most important part.
I do too.
Because I think the journey is the process of us becoming the type of person who can carry the thing we have waiting for us when we get to the top.
Yeah.
But if you think of it like a mountain too, we often get halfway in and we recognize we're not even walking in the direction that we think the peak. So we think we might be lost, stuck. We're actually moving. And we start to question if we're on the trail. Mm-hmm. And those are the moments where we think maybe we turn back or we camp out or we quit. But usually too, along the way, something happens. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's like that person walking down just at the right time.
Yep.
To remind you, hey, you're on the right trail. Just keep walking. It looks like you're moving in the wrong direction, but hey, this is a trail, part of the trail that's going like this, but keep going around the corner. You're getting another glimpse.
Yeah.
And it's just that second wind or that third wind. Was there a moment for you like that? Because you went into real estate, you were successful, but you're now back into doing the thing.
You know, I'm trying to think of if there was a second wind. I mean, you know, like you say, it's not about the destination, it's the journey. I think along the journey, I've had those people, as you mentioned, coming down the mountain to keep me on track. And there was one time where I thought, listen, being a man of faith, you know, what's the best way to see if I can hear from God? And it was to fast. So I was like, I'm going to fast for 30 days. Like, oh my goodness. And you know, you think I'm going to do this great spiritual thing of fasting. And first day I'm like, wow, I'm going to hear from God. And then 29 days later, I have heard nothing.
Except from your stomach.
Except from my stomach. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I'm like, okay, I don't know if this Hollywood thing is dead. Like, have I misheard the universe? Have I misheard God? Like, I just don't know. So it was like literally 29 days and like probably something like 23 hours and 50 minutes.
Yeah.
And I walk around my mum's neighborhood, and this is a funny thing. This has not happened to me much. And I'm sorry for your viewers if they think this is a little bit weird, but I went into an open vision. I had a vision of Hollywood. And I saw the Hollywood sign, and it was like beautiful with flowers everywhere. And there was so much vibrancy and color. Then it went completely dystopian. Everything lost its color. And right next to the Hollywood sign, there was a forest, but this forest had no foliage. There were no leaves on the trees. And all the trees were dead and completely intertwined. And in the middle of the trees, I saw few people with lanterns trying to navigate their way through the forest. Then I'm taken to an aerial view, an elevated view, and there's an opening in the forest, and I see a graveyard. And around the graveyard, there's a wrought iron fence, all broken. In the middle of the graveyard, there's somebody with a lantern. And at the entrance of a graveyard, there's another person with a lantern with a tribe of people behind them. So I was like, interesting. So I said, God, who are the people in the forest? And he went, there are people of faith who have kept their light, but they've tried to navigate their way through the system. Then I said, who's the person in the middle? And he said, it's David Oyelowo. And I went, I'm sure I've heard that name. Who's David Oyelowo? And I said, who's the person at the gate, at the entrance? Said, it's you. And he says, when I take it, I'm going to take it all at once. And then stopped. So I went, okay, David Oyelowo, I'm sure I've heard of him. Anyway, amazing working actor, lead in Selma. Like, he's doing so much now. So I'm like, how do I get this word to him? I don't even know if he's a person of faith. Yeah. What do I do? It took me 18 years to get him that word. 18 years. I got it to him.
Yeah.
And he spoke at our school. He's a man of faith, crazy, loves Jesus. And I think that was one of the points that kept me on track. Another point after that was, 2008 hits. And what I thought was a very successful real estate portfolio was now, oh my goodness, we could lose it all. Yeah. And the thing that I said I would never do was become a barber. I ended up becoming a barber and actually buying my dad's business off him. But in that time, I understood the value of being in the mundane, doing something that I didn't want to do, but providing for my family, working with my hands. And then it was in 2012 where I thought that there just became a shift. There was an unease in myself and my wife, and we knew that something was brewing, something was shifting. And I started to hear about a church in a small mountain town in Reading called Bethel Church. And we started listening to their music. We started listening to Bill Johnson and Chris Vallett and their preachers. And it gave words to things that I didn't know how to express in my heart, but they were questions that I wanted to ask, but nobody had answers for, and they did. And in 2012, we applied for the School of Ministry. Bearing in mind, I'm an actor in real estate and a hairdresser, and now I'm applying for seminary to ministry school. So we came to America August 24th, 2012, never ever thinking I was going to act again. But people were saying, do you think your career is going to take off when you move to the States? And I went, I'm going to a mountain town.
Right.
And it's a Bible college.
Yeah.
The first person I meet when I get there, digging holes at Bethel Christian School, I say, so what do you do for a living? He goes, I'm an actor. And I went, you've got to be kidding me. But I didn't know if I could say I was an actor because it'd been a while that I'd taken a hiatus, right? So then we started talking. This guy ends up becoming my business partner, David Neronia, who we go to who we did for a long time into coaching. And, you know, and it ended up from there. That was my kind of second wind.
Wow.
Where I felt like my calling had been kind reinstated.
Effervesces there.
Yeah, it did. But obviously, again, due to my ego and a lot of other things, those same character traits manifested even in the church world.
Well, that's quite a state, even in the church world.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I thought I'm coming here for health, right?
Right. But no, we bring ourselves.
We do.
Like, it's not a magic panacea that solves anything.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I think part of the story I find part of that story that I find interesting is you have this open waking vision, and it's a transformational moment is what it sounds like. It doesn't sound like something you'll ever forget. No. Right. So this transformational moment occurs, and you're talking about at the beginning of the journey, you're looking up at this mountain peak. And I think one of the things that we almost always get wrong at the beginning of that journey is what that peak is. Mm-hmm. We have a vision, it gets us started, and it'll get framed as a calling, and then it'll get attached to God. Yeah, it's God's call, and I understand it, and it's that peak. And then you have an experience like that where it transforms itself. Mm-hmm. Because I don't think very many people actually end up on the mountain peak they think they're going to end up on. Sure. Mm-hmm. It's often completely different. Yeah. It's not maybe even a different peak. Maybe that's a story we can tell about quitting and going onto the right peak.
Might be a different mountain range.
Maybe. But so many people tell a story like this where they started out with this language, this conviction, this passion, this calling, these kinds of words, and they just knew. And about halfway through, somebody walks down the mountain and says, yeah, it's not at all what you think. It's harder than you think. Yep. And I think it might be better than you think. Because when you're talking about Hollywood would have crushed me. Yeah. Right? Yeah. That was the mountain peak you were after.
Yeah, it was.
And it's like, yeah, that's not what it is. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us, though, actually do end up trying and working hard because you can get to that peak and end up getting crushed by it.
Oh, yeah.
And then that's the transformational event you'll have.
Yeah, I think, too, to that point, when you start off young or at the beginning, maybe young is the wrong word, but you're at the beginning of that journey, the dimension of what you see is a low resolution
very low
picture,
resolution.
Mm-hmm. Very one-dimensional or two-dimensional. And so as you get closer, it's not that it's changing, but your proximity to it is changing, and you're gaining a higher depth, a higher resolution picture. And usually what started out as the one-dimensional is the role, it's the vocation, it's the title, it's the position. But as I get closer to it, for me, it becomes less about that, and it's more about what that role or thing was doing. And all of a sudden, it's the meaning behind the role that made the most sense, because it's like preaching on stage behind a pulpit or firing up a company, and leading a business with 100 employees looks like the thing. But we learn along the way, it's really the influencing people to believe in a vision bigger than themselves, or empowering people to be everything that they were designed to be, that frames in the purpose.
I think so.
For me, right?
I think low resolution is one way to think about it for sure. I think it's low resolution if we run with that, because usually these things are happening when we're young. I think youth plays a big part in this. And one of the things that young people forget, because they don't know yet, is they're also very immature. A 21-year-old, Carson's 21, 21-year-old, if they've done well, is like nailing being a kid. they're like an excellent child, but they're a brand new adult.
Right.
And it's in this season that we start asking the questions like, what's your vision for your life? And what are you going to become? And what are you passionate about? They don't know.
Yeah.
You got to live a couple decades.
Yeah.
And you also have to go through the process of being able to see success through a very different lens. And those early stage low resolution lenses are low resolution because we're just immature at that. All my dreams when I was that age didn't come to pass. None of them were precisely correct. They all had something embedded in them that I carried through.
Right.
There was something there, but I would have told you I was called to this and called to that, and
Yeah.
God told me
I
this
agree
and
with
God
that.
told me that. But no. My ego got very involved in those early sense of mission and purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think too, when you grow up, you realize too, I think when you're young, you think it's a one lane. There's only one way to get there. And the older you get, you realize, wait a second, this is not a one lane highway. Sometimes there are, and you're behind that farm truck that's just going 45 and you just got to like turn the radio on and cruise. But most of life, there's multiple lanes. And like, okay, it's not a one lane highway, it's a 4-lane highway. And I don't have to stay in this lane because this highway is leading to a place.
Yeah.
And I have options.
But there are also exits.
There's a lot of
There might be
Exactly,
rerouting.
yeah.
There might
Correct.
be, your GPS may go all over the
Yeah.
place because there may be a roadblock or a crash or something. And
You
are
might be the
guided.
crash.
You might be the crash. And for most part of my
And
life,
you
I
gotta
think I
go
was
get
the
a new
big
car and
crash.
start all over.
You do.
Yeah.
And, I realize now the journey was about the thing or what I perceived would be the thing, like the glitz and the glamour, rather than the people along the journey.
Yeah. There's a shift. We talk about it on this podcast all the time between being motivated externally by things that are glitz and glamour and external us. And if I could just be Leonardo DiCaprio, I would
solve all my problems.
What it would solve is certain problems and
Right,
create
of
a whole
course.
other mountain
Exactly.
of other ones, right?
Yeah, it would.
And then there's those transformational events cause us to start looking inside, right? We start to reassess what does it mean to be successful. We use the same words, but they have totally different meanings on the other side of a transformation like that.
Yes.
At what point did you find this truly lock-in's the wrong word for it because it never ends. We're always in this journey. So it's too easy to talk about this as though there's a before and after, right? There's just an ongoing. But but there are moments like that vision where we finally go, oh, right, this is going to be hard. But something's making it worth it. Something inside.
Right.
You're talking about early stage not having the identity piece.
Yeah.
And now you're teaching that. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
When did you find that inner thing that caused you to go, I'm in?
I mean, I think, we talked about Call. I was so focused on the vision when I got to Reading about wanting to build a training center for Christians. Because I think what Bethel do very well at the School of Ministry is they impart your identity to you very, very, very well. So we were here for 4 years before we even got the opportunity to talk to the senior leader about Bethel Conservatory of the Arts, right? So when we set that up, I thought, this is the calling. This is it. And it was a lot of hard work. And I thought, oh, wow, the dream, living in the dream is way better than I thought. Until we started to put legs to it and realize how tough it was. And I actually, if I'm being completely honest, we've been open, this is our 7th year. It wasn't until last year that I really had a transformation. Because
what's that about?
So I was creating so many messes. I was an absent leader. I was hurting people. Myself and my business partner, Kurt will say to this, it was a train wreck, but on a level that was so emotionally exhausting. I was triggered. I felt attacked. I just wouldn't give my wife a voice. I was so controlling that in 2022, because of the way I conducted myself or the buildup of it, caused such a toxic working environment in a church, bearing in mind.
That's no surprise.
Well, it's sad though, really, right?
Yeah.
No, we'll talk about that
We'll
later.
talk about that later. But,
Sorry.
But I know from my experience, it wasn't necessarily my heart's
It's
desire.
not the expectation at all.
No, it's not the expectation. But every time people would challenge me, I felt attacked.
Yeah.
I felt like they were ganging up on me. I wouldn't listen to feedback and I would always react. And then I go on vacation in end of May 2022. Bearing in mind, I'd lost the majority of my staff in my department. They all left. I go on vacation. I'm in my cousin's resort in the south of Italy. It's beautiful, stunning. When I drank at the time, I had a nice glass of wine at the side of me. And I'm sat down in this cabana and I get hit across the chest with a baseball bat. And God said to me, "You're an addict." And I said, "What am I addicted to?" I said, "You're addicted to being busy and you medicate with cigars, social media, and alcohol." He said, "You treat your wife like crap. You treat her like an employee and you're preaching a message you do not live." And I was floored.
Yeah.
Floored. And I'm proactive. So if you give me something, I'm going to change it straight away. I'm going to go after it hard. But I felt like a ton of shame. What have I done? Because now the scales are truly, he put a mirror in front of my face. He went,
There it is.
"There it is, dude." And I tried to learn it with you.
Yeah.
Try to learn it.
Yeah.
So I repented to my wife. I said, "I'm so sorry. I'm never going to do that again. Never going to do that again." I stopped drinking. Sober 14 months.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I made it my focus to love people and make sure they weren't going to burn out, because all my staff were burning out because of the expectation that I would put on them, that it wasn't good enough. You're not coming up to my level. I mean, I said this to my daughter's year. "You will never outwork me." What a stupid phrase. Okay, I'm using the idea of a work ethic, but in a way to say,
Yeah, you're proving.
You're proving.
Trying to prove something, right?
So a year on, Mitch and Kirk, it's been the best year of my marriage.
Good.
None of my staff have left. It was the healthiest year the conservatory's ever seen.
Good.
And it gets me emotional, but like David and I
Yeah.
have never been better. We're like brothers. I love him.
Love each other again.
Absolutely. And it changed everything. That one thing of going, I'm not going to make the same mistakes I made, because when Fab isn't healthy, he's a tornado of catastrophe. And like now my wife is like, I said, "Listen, you're going to have to trust me, because I might go back to old habits. I might go back. You're going to have to trust me," because I've done it before. I'd like read a book like The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and for 6 months, I'd be great. Back into busyness. And now if somebody says, "Can I meet with you? I know you're busy." I says, No. How do you know I'm busy? Don't ever presume, and please don't ever use that word in front of me again. I'm available for you. So I made myself available for my staff. And there's certain things that I would usually do, I'm not going to do those anymore.
Yeah.
And if balls are dropped, they're dropped.
Man. It's funny how, I've heard stories like that before. You've heard them. I've actually lived through my own process of breaking down. I think we get there late, so sometimes the crash is harder because we blew through a few warning signs along the way. But there's this place where I think we finally surrender, but then it's like everything changes and yet nothing changes.
What do you mean by that?
So like here, you had this kind of level set moment, but your work and what you were doing, you didn't throw all that away. In fact, you came back and you showed up the same person, same role, same team, whatever. I mean, if some left, but the team that remained. And yet that picture didn't change, but something in you reset.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you're showing up doing the same things you were doing before, but everything has just changed in a moment. And it's that thing where on the surface you go, well, nothing really changed, but there's a level of rest, right? The control that we tend to go after for whatever reason, whatever that's rooted in, that's gone, and we've surrendered to the fact that any form of control is usually just an illusion. And then all of a sudden we're liberated, and now we're showing up rather than for something, trying to act into it to control it. We're operating from a place.
From a place.
And peace and rest and joy.
And rest isn't the absence of activity, but it's a posture of your heart.
Yeah.
And it's like my entire operating system changed. Like, I'll bring my wife up and say, oh, I'm hanging out with the boys tonight, but I really actually want to hang out with you. I never knew what it was like to not abuse my wife. What does that mean? Did I physically abuse her? No, of course not. But not giving her a voice, telling her that she wasn't worth it. And then this year, her voice has just exploded.
Isn't that amazing?
Amazing. And I said, I want to hang out with the boys, but I'd rather hang out with you. She's become my best friend, and I've never known that before. I always wanted to hang out because I wanted to escape it. Yeah. She goes, why are you having another drink tonight? I'm going, what do you mean? Are you my mother? And I realized that was the key component of being an addict. I was addicted to busyness because like people saw me on my phone or, I can't talk. My identity was based in busyness. So I wouldn't focus on people, but it stopped me focusing on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found too that in my own process of learning to rest, because I'm, my hobby of work, I enjoy working.
Yeah, of course.
If you're going to say, hey, you got some free time, I'm probably going to go build something.
Yeah.
And it's a way of me recreating and creating, and I think there's a place for that.
Yeah.
But for me, my process of rest was recognizing that it wasn't resting because I needed my body to take a break. For me, rest was a matter of trust. So the rest issue for me was, do I trust that when I'm not working, there's enough for me?
Yes.
Oh.
Because in the rest, if you think of Sabbath and its origin, what we understand in the Sabbath is that when we work, we're blessed. But when we rest, we're more blessed. Because it's in the resting that I'm not planting my fields. And yet it's in that year, even when I take off from not planting, I yield a harvest of 2 and even 3 times more when I didn't do anything, which in that posture for me is, I don't have to provide everything, but in my rest, I can trust that there's enough for me. And for me, that was part of my busyness, was I had to make it happen.
Yeah. That's exactly
it all depends on me. If I don't show up, no one else will. All these lies.
All the lies.
And all of a sudden, it's like, wait a second, are you really that important?
Yeah.
Like, really, if you don't show up tomorrow, it'll all fall apart.
Down? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That important. One of the ways that I play with this idea these days is I change some of the words around, and instead of talking about rest, I'll actually talk about play.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea of blurring the lines between work and play, because we come out of cultures and economies where in order to work was very much connected to focus and being productive. I'm focusing on something. And then we have this idea that that's where we create value. So we call that work. And then we have this other thing we do, which we call it rest or vacation or play, but it's not focused and it's not where we create value. And so we have these two dichotomies. But in today's world, we're increasingly finding that we need to actually learn how to create value in these different modes of being in the world. That you can't actually do some of the things that we do, which are valuable, without like losing focus. And so we talk about the focus and the fuzzy. And there's places where value is created through great focus, and then there's places where value gets created through fuzzy, but it doesn't feel productive. It's not a straight line. You open up your vision into all the peripheral, and you start to make connections between things that may not appear connected, but focus is shutting down your vision, right? And so when I'm working, especially with people who are talking about this idea of having to, like they're always focused and they're always working hard and they're very busy and they're proud of it, and they come online in a coaching call and I'm like, how you doing? They're like, I'm busy. I'm like, can we just acknowledge that that's always the state you're in? I don't need that answer anymore. Like, say something interesting. And they wear it as this badge of honor, which many of us do. But I think we've gotten the notion of work wrong. Work is when you're focused, rest is when you're not. I'm like, but what if work is simply the creation of value? What if that's what work is? And what if in order to do that in today's economy, we have to be both focused and fuzzy? And so if that's the case, then this notion of rest, or this opposite of busyness, right, is a necessary, non-negotiable part of being a busy person or a valuable value creation unit, that we can no longer live in a world where busyness is the marker of someone who's being productive.
Right.
You have to get out into places where you're playing, You were just mentioning Shakespeare, right? His group of workers were called players.
Right.
And they worked plays. And I go out and I'll spend time out in the mountains, or I go out and I think of it as cleaning my mind. Because during a work week, when I'm really focusing on stuff, I get all this clogged up stuff in there. And I have to go out and just be in the world. And I play golf, I'll go fishing, I'll go wander the hiking and all this stuff, which is nothing more than something to keep me busy while I'm just getting fuzzy. But I think that has become a necessary part of work. When you're doing work that is creative, requires innovation, you got to get unfocused. And when we're carrying around our badge of honor of I'm just so busy and I'm always focused and I'm always being productive, I'm like, that's not the best way to create value anymore.
Or unless play is great value and you can be focused in your play.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You know
Sometimes
what I mean?
your ideas show up there
yeah.
unexpectedly.
I do a bit all the time where I've probably written about this, I don't know how many times, but I'll say, when people say they do their best thinking in the shower, I will immediately respond, well, you should clearly take more showers. But that's the natural and obvious byproduct of the statement, I do my best thinking in the showers, but that's not what people are trying to communicate. It's like this magical weird thing happened in the shower. But the shower is one of the only places that busy people get completely naked. They lose all their tech. Have you ever noticed how we will not let tech in the shower? And we could. There's no technical reason not to, except it's a sacred place. We get warm, we get wet, we are alone for the most part, and we come down and we get fuzzy, and suddenly we do our best thinking.
Yeah, that's really good. It's interesting too, because you brought up the ruthless elimination of hurry. But I think in that, that's a great book, by the way, that just really breaks down Sabbath. But he brings back the word of not resting for rest's sake, but actually delighting.
Yeah.
So I think play
That's
is
the
another
right-
another word
another word
is
for
this
it.
idea that we delight in our work.
Yeah.
So we've been working, but now let's go enjoy it.
Yeah.
And in that play, we get more inspired and more ambition to show back up.
I think it's also the ability to not fill your time so much that it stops you from looking inward. Like I found some of my greatest ideas have come out of boredom. Like if you can be bored and just allow space and be comfortable in that uncomfortability, you have so many crazy ideas because I allow myself to kind of settle and go, I'm not going to look at tech.
Right.
I'm just going to allow myself to be.
That's right.
But a lot of busyness for me comes out of chaos and survival mode.
Right. And you
That's what it
cannot
is.
be with yourself if it's chaos. I mean, when you're in that mode, the last thing the world want to do, the last thing any of us want to do is be with ourselves. And so we stay not with ourselves.
Right. And nobody really wants to be with you when you're in chaos and survival mode, which, 47 years, thank you very much.
But we're all I think too, we're all in a culture where the natural drive or pace is more and more faster and faster.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, we literally are living in a world that is, it's evolving so quick. So we need to fight against it. If what we're saying too, that we have to find ways to delight and play and get fuzzy and show up, that's not just going to happen automatically because the world is pushing us on a treadmill. And we got to step off it in some way. I wonder what does that look like for you? Like,
yeah, I've really been intentional about the rhythms that I put in my life. So I would always loved fitness. But when I was busy, who was the first person I would neglect?
Yourself.
Myself.
Yeah.
So what did I do? I started putting myself first. So when I had that encounter with God, he said, listen, you've got from 8 to 5 to work. Anything before 8 is my time or your time. Anything after 5 is your family time. So I'd start to put these rhythms in. So I created like a kind of a 15-minute model. So now I get up at like 4:30. I'll do my audio Bible for 15 minutes. I'll do my Wim Hof breathing for 15 minutes. I meditate for 15 minutes. And then I'll do my finances for 15 minutes. I might write for 15 minutes. And then I go on a 3 to 4 mile walk. And then when I get back to ready to have a shower and go to work, I've already achieved more things than most people will do in a day in just those 15-minute increments that for me, I put my time and people go, well, that's way too regimented. It isn't. I need that structure and system. Otherwise, if I'm not, I'm just in chaos. So I bring that organization and then I'll go to work. I've done everything that I feel fit and healthy. I'll come back, I'll work out, and then I'll have time with my family. Or well, my wife, because my kids are a bit older now. So they're all over the place doing that. My daughter moved out. And then at night before I go to bed, I'll read 10 pages of a book, and then I'll go to sleep. And I'll repeat that, and I do it Monday through Friday. Then Saturday, I allow myself time to rest.
Why did it take 47 years?
Oh, I don't know.
I know, and it's a terrible question.
I don't
It's a
know.
wonderful answer. But why did it take, I mean, it's a miserable question.
It is a really miserable question.
Because it invites maybe
you should have said, what were you
regret.
going off that it took 47 years?
No, that's not what I mean. It's not what I mean. Stick with me for a second. It invites regret. And I don't think that's the right perspective.
But you're right, though.
It does invite that.
It
though,
does.
right?
It does.
I think a better response than regret is grief, which is part of the shame, coming out of shame. There's a grief. Regret is probably a waste of time, but grief is an act of love, right? It's a love response. And it takes, one of the things the reason I asked this question, and I'm going to ask it again, but the reason I ask is, I hear from people around this age who will say things like, oh, if I had known what I know now when I was in my 20s, and then which is kind of an amazing, like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And then they don't always think this, but sometimes I'll hear, oh gosh, I'm going to start a mentoring program and I'm going to teach all the 20-somethings what I now know so they don't have to experience this.
Yeah.
Right? But for some reason, it takes till about now to have that thought for a lot of us. And I'm curious if you've had enough time, it's been about a year.
Yeah, 14 months.
To ponder why it took 47 years. Without regret, I'm not asking that question. I would not invite that on you. And I think 14 months, you've done some grieving. But the 6th stage of grief, it's a new book it's not new now, but they've added a 6th, is meaning. What did it mean that it took 47 years?
Oh, man, that's a great question. Let me just go into where I think the grief was. Parenting.
Yeah.
How I've really wasn't there for my daughter. Not giving my wife, a voice, not being her best friend, what she needed from me. My staff, my friends.
Yeah.
I think that's a big area of grief.
Yeah.
I think I'm over it now, and it's only in times where I'm like, I wish I would have done it a bit sooner. I wish I wouldn't have done that with my daughter.
Yeah.
And we were with my daughter last night, and she says she's seen the change. Yeah. Because she said before you and Mum didn't communicate. So but I've seen the change. I've seen it. But nonetheless, it doesn't undo the damage that's been done. But at least give somebody a hope to
There's
go,
hope in
I
it.
can trust you now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep looking, biding my time, seeing if it's going to be one of Dad's fads. But I think a year, 14 months into something is enough time to build trust back.
Yeah, it's coming.
Because I'm doing it on a daily basis. And I think my whole candor and posture and everything is very different.
Yeah.
I wonder too if you'll be able to enter into a deeper love with your daughter as a result of her seeing her dad be honest and actually work through this. So look it in the eye, acknowledge it. I wonder if on the other side you'll have that deeper love that you might not have had if everything played out.
No,
You have to be careful with that kind of a statement, because if that's true, then the path to deeper love is to ignore, disrespect your daughter for 47. Well, she's not 47.
No.
You got to first be a bad parent and then get over it, and then you'll have a relationship with your daughter that is deeper. Yeah. You also don't have to plan for the events in your life that are going to be your failures. They will come.
Oh, guaranteed.
Right. And it's how you respond to them that will build depth with people around you.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. I just what I'm trying to bring to light is the redemptive work post.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the story.
Not at all.
No.
You know, I
All
remember
stories matter. Where you start and stop is how all stories are framed, right?
And there's those moments where, like, I remember when I went through that process with me of just kind of resetting. You know, one of the things my oldest son had said was, you know, wow, that I always thought you were a super dad. And I never thought I could live up to your pace. Like you're just running all the time, doing these amazing things. Everyone loves you. And I just thought that's impossible. And to see you break and be honest with that process, he actually, it brought him some life. Yeah, it brought him a sense of perspective, but that's a good point.
Yeah. Can I come back to the why did it take 47 years?
Yeah.
Or did you answer that already?
I don't know if I did.
Okay. So I'm asking the question, I want to come back to why did it take 47 years?
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's an answer. I'm not looking for anything in particular.
Yeah.
But when I ask that question, what does that spark in you? What does that resonate? How does that question feel?
It makes me feel, if I'm being honest, a little bit of shame.
Okay.
Because it took that long. But it also makes me realize, gosh, God is so gracious. And also the fact that, like, gosh, if I can change at 48, what am I going to do with the next 48 years? I'm like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, what can I impart to all these people that might be like, I can't do it, I'm too old now. I'm like, no, dude.
You're not too
like,
old.
let's go. And I want to be like,
I love that.
I want to be able to help people go, listen, you're in busyness. Yo, let's change this, dude. Yeah, but I don't know what else to do. I'm like, come on. We can totally change that.
Yeah.
We can totally, because busyness, survival, and chaos. Let's disrupt your current world. And my version of disruption is restoring something back to its original intent. I'm a creative disruptor, right? So how were you originally created? Because this is not showing the best of you.
Right.
Let's creatively disrupt it.
Yeah.
So it's restored back to its original intent.
I don't know if this helps or not, but in my experience, these journeys take decades. But it's not 27. This stuff doesn't happen in our late 20s. When I've been hit in the chest with a baseball bat, right? It took me decades to be able to respond to that well. On the previous episode, if they come out in the order I think they're going to come out, I tell a story of one of the places where I was hit over the head with a baseball bat. I didn't figure that out for years later, what actually happened. It wasn't until, I don't know, maybe a decade later that I finally put it all together and went, wow, I was an ass. Ooh, I'm still an ass? You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It takes as long as it takes. And it's shocking. I think that's part of why we feel regret or shame for it is because it's shocking how long it takes. Because once you see it, it's so obvious.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it resonates back to all the things we've been told about, like, oh gosh, they've been telling me this for years.
Yeah, how did it not land?
How did I not? And I was trying, and then another piece of it is I was trying so hard to be good.
I know.
Like it's not like we were trying to screw our world up. We were trying to make it great for everybody.
Yeah.
I think it's when you understand that your triggers come from your previous templates, right?
Yeah.
The stories that you always believe about yourself or the stories that your parents left to you. And I think it was at that point that I realized that, like, my parents weren't bad people.
Right.
But I just assumed a lot of their unhealthy traits. And
what else could we do? That's how it works.
One of the things that I feel passionate about as we're talking about, you know, some vulnerable things that is when I went through my process, I think what I realized is no one was talking about it.
yeah.
I had to find people and I had to ask a lot of questions and get people to finally get honest with me.
Yeah.
And I think in my journey of that being a really difficult thing to navigate, I've learned to go, I'm going to be willing to talk about this.
Totally.
Now, I'm not trying to insulate those who are following me younger, my kids, from their own journey. But I think standing alongside them and going, hey guys, this isn't going to be
Right.
easy. There's going to be hard moments, but it's going to be okay. And even some of this is going to be necessary.
And
That helps a ton.
And that gives them, they're going to mimic us in whatever we do. And it gives them something else to work with. Because I think there's a lot of people, I think it's self-evident there are a lot of people who never take advantage of these moments. They just white knuckle it to the end. They stay in that survival mode. And people talk a lot about trying to get into thrive, right? They talk a lot about, I just want to get there, I want to get there. It's a terrifying, dangerous place to get, because you have to abandon all the tools you've used to survive. And for a lot of people, they're actually functional coping mechanisms.
Oh, 100%.
Right? And so you're giving up functional coping mechanisms and a life that actually works at some level. And the level is you're surviving.
Yeah.
In order, I know it's worth it on the other side.
Yeah.
But that transition is no small thing.
It isn't. But I would highly recommend, though, any of your viewers watching this, like, if you have coping mechanisms, if you medicate, I would highly look at yourself and go, listen, it might be hard to get there, but like stopping drinking was the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Right.
It was the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
People go, but I can't do it. I'm like, because you're an addict. But to break the cycle, you have to break the cycle of addiction.
Yeah.
You may never feel ready, but you've just got to take that step and do it, because the benefits on the other side, it's like somebody going, I'm not disciplined enough to work out. I'm going, you're ridiculous.
Right.
You still have the same amount of time as anybody else in a day. It's just choosing your focus on. And I'm like, if you work out, if you become fit, the results are so addictive that you'll never want to go back.
Right.
The results of being your wife's best friend are so addictive, you'll never want to go back. So on the other side of survival is, I don't know what that would be, but it's not survival.
Well, it's the in the faith tradition that believes in life after death. You've got to really wonder if we do. We talk about it as this abstract thing later, but if we believe, if that's a real thing you believe, then why is it so hard to die while you're living?
Yeah.
And that's what the transition you're talking about. That's how I think about it, is we do not believe with our actions that there's life after the death of the way I'm living, the way I'm showing up in the world. We don't want to let it go. And we don't believe that on the other side of that is anything good. And then what you're describing is you finally cracked and you died, surrendered is another word for it in the lived experience. And then what you found on the other side of that was not a dystopian wasteland of lack of enjoyment. Oh, no. Right? But on this side of it, on the other side of it, that's what it would have, that's what people say. I don't want to it's the only thing worth living for in life or whatever, right? But that death process, well, if we believe in life after death, why? Jack Burgess, he says to me one day, he says, I think I figured it out. I'm like, what's that? He says, the whole game is how fast can you die? I'm like, I don't want to know that, Jack. Keep that one to yourself. Or you can think about it this way: the first in a conflict, in a difficult situation, the first one to die kind of wins.
You told me that,
right?
You told me that.
I did. If you believe in life after death, if you don't, then that makes no sense. In fact, I think turn it around so far to say, I think the reason that the spiritual teachers in our life actually build a framework for life after actual death is because it works in life. Right? It works now. Well, why wouldn't it work later? And, we'll find out.
It's scary.
It's
because
that's what I mean by it's.
Yeah, it is.
It's very scary.
I call him. I have a huge bust up with my business partner. Kirk, I need to speak to you. I need to speak to you. So he drives up. I said, have you got 10 minutes to sit in the car? I said to him, what am I going to do? I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. And I said, what should I do?
And it was believable.
It was. And he said, die. I said, what?
Yeah.
You freaking, what do you mean die? Die. Be the first to apologize and die. And I was going to get that tattooed on my wrist, actually. But it's the thing is, like, on the other side of death, there's resurrection.
It's life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a daily, I don't know. It's a cyclical test of that statement.
Yeah.
Do we actually believe that?
And do we want to do it? And the thing is, like, sometimes you have no choice.
Yeah.
But if you have a choice, take it. Take it. This whole thing of, like, the hustle and the grind. And I'm not saying don't be successful. Like, do whatever you want. But, like, that whole thing of, right, let's hustle and let's do this. And I'm like, I just don't know anymore.
Well, that's why I say in the process of creating value in the modern economy, play is non-negotiable. And if you it's where the creativity, it's necessary for creativity. It's not the only
essential
place.
for creativity. It's essential. And like family and friends and people along the way, the most important thing.
So once again, we've shot another podcast in the head. We've run out of memory, I think.
Oh, you have?
No, not really.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was going to like
A metaphor.
looking at you, producer. I was like, what?
Fab, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
We've connected numerous times over this journey. And the other day, when you approached me and you told me this story, and your countenance and it's in the eyes. It's always in the eyes. Was so different. And I was like, oh, he did it. Congratulations.
Thank you, dude.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. I
You
appreciate
mentioned
that.
at the very beginning that you have a podcast.
We do
Tell us
have a
just a
podcast,
little bit
yeah.
about that.
Get through the tears first. So it's called Storia, which is the Italian word for story.
Oh, cool.
And it's where storytellers disrupt. So it's like people's lives where they have, disrupted maybe, I don't know, the faith space industry. They were in Hollywood and now they're in the faith space. Or they were a poet and they've just decided their story has been disrupted by something, or their story is disrupting something. And we have a broad range of guests from like influencers, actors, directors, dancers, students from our school whose lives are being changed and who by their story is changing lives. So it's a really fun podcast. I think we're about 7 episodes in. We've recorded 27. So we've got like another 18 or 20 in the bag. And then we're going to start recording again soon. So yeah, on Instagram, it's called Podcast Storia.
Great. And then how would if somebody resonated with your story and this idea that there's this Conservatory of the Arts in this mountain town in the Northern California, how would they find out
So you
more
can
about
go
that?
to bethelconservatory.com and you can get in contact with us that way. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Fabiano Altamura. And then we also have Bethel Conservatory of the Arts on Instagram. So yeah, they're the places you can get in touch with us. Yeah, please do.
Cool. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having us, me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.